It's the end of the year, you know what that means. It's time to make loads of promises to ourselves that we'll become better people next year, knowing full well that we'll make absolutely no effort to change whatsoever. My New Year's resolution is to stop eating so many plastic bags. I need to leave some for the turtles in the ocean, otherwise they'll starve. Over the last 12 months, I've been sinking my teeth and other appendages into games to distract myself from the fleeting nature of life. And some of them have been really good, and I want to highlight them here because I may not necessarily talk about them again in the future. I did this last year, and the year before, and the year before that, but if you're not familiar with this best games I played in 20XX format, let me break it down Scottish style. Basically how this works is I talk about games that I've played over the year of 2023. To qualify to be talked about, I only need to have played the game for the first time this year. They don't have to be games that were released in 2023, I just need to have played them for the first time in 2023. So anything could happen here, and that's what makes it so exciting. So strap yourselves in and get ready for a great list of games, accompanied by some witty banter along the way. I can't do a Scottish accent, but I felt that it was important to try. Anyway, games. Here are the best games I played in 2023. Let's talk about them. Stepping up first into the ring, coming in at 9 years old and 80 Australian dollars, it's Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze! The Donkey Kong Country games, I believe there are 5. Of them, I've played 3. I played the first Donkey Kong Country for a review on this channel between a year and a bit ago, and I also played Donkey Kong Country Returns quite a lot in my childhood, which was well over a decade ago. So Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is the most recent in the series, and I really enjoyed it. It captures pretty much exactly the same vibe as Country Returns. It sort of takes me back to playing that as a kid, which I really liked, but obviously it adds a few more modern twists because it is a slightly more modern game. But yeah, it was just as fun. It was really challenging, really tough. I did try and go for 100% completion, trying to get all the puzzle pieces, because that was one of the things I really liked about Country Returns was sleuthing out and looking for those secrets, those puzzle pieces. It was just a really fun vibe, and I think, Tropical Freeze matches that energy. It offers the same sort of gameplay. Obviously, it's the same style. It's 2D platforming, very tough, very fun. There are some additions that I do like. In Country Returns, the only other companion character besides Donkey Kong himself was Diddy Kong. So I like how in this game you also get the opportunity to use Dixie Kong and Cranky Kong. And you can also use Funky Kong, which is sort of baby mode. So yeah, I do really like that. In terms of presentation, it's amazing. It looks and sounds great. I like all the gimmicks in the secret levels, especially the silhouette star, which I believe also returns from Country Returns. It was just very, everything's unique. It's awesome. The levels are very well designed and dynamic. They're very fun. The boss fights were actually decent, which is rare in platformers, I find. They usually suck pretty bad. But in Tropical Freeze, they're really good. I just sort of like this game overall. It doesn't really take any wrong steps as far as I'm aware. I guess the story is a bit, who cares? But it's Donkey Kong. Like, who cares about Donkey Kong story, I really enjoyed this game. It's tough, it's fun, it's well presented. I don't have a negative thing to say about it. So yeah, if you're a platforming fan, if you're a Donkey Kong fan, if you like bananas, if you like ice, Donkey Kong Country or if you like ice. Ice is a drug. Don't do drugs, I'm not endorsing that. Stay sober. If you like platforming, you'll probably like Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, so give it a play if you're interested. This next game was actually released in 2023, and that's Fire Emblem Engage. I'm a pretty big Fire Emblem fan. Well, not a pretty big fan, I'd say. I'm a fan of the series, but I'm not a hardcore fan. I haven't played every game in the series, but I am familiar with it, and I do enjoy it. And Engage, I really enjoyed, because it's sort of a celebration of the whole series, in a way. So, going into this, I had experienced quite a few Fire Emblem games before. I've played the 7th one, which I think has... Is it the Binding Blade, or is it Blazing Blade? It's something like that. I started with Awakening, and then I went back and played the 7th one, which I think is Binding Blade, but it could be Blazing Blade, I can't remember. I've also played Sacred Stones, Shadow Dragon, Path of Radiance, Fates, and Echoes, and also Three Houses. So I am very familiar with Fire Emblem. And I really enjoyed this one. It's sort of got, because Three Houses, which was the one before this, it's so different from the other Fire Emblems that I've played, because it's very much monastery based. If you're not familiar with Three Houses, this is not going to make any sense whatsoever. But the thing with Three Houses is it's sort of focused less on the actual RPG strategy battle element. That sort of falls to the side, and the focus is on building relationships with your units and spending time at the monastery, which, I mean, it was fun the first time, but every subsequent playthrough, it's sort of like, do we really have to spend 10 fucking hours wandering around giving Ferdinand von Ayer some heavy boots or whatever his item is? Like, it's not what Fire Emblem's about. So I'm glad that Engage sort of went back to the roots a bit and focused more on the actual strategy game that it's supposed to be. As presentation-wise, it does look a lot better than Three Houses. Three Houses was kind of rough. I think it is the best-looking Fire Emblem game so far, and it's presented very nicely. The thing about the story is it's kind of cheesy and a bit lame, but it's also kind of cool. It's very sort of over-the-top. I want to call it like anime style, which, I mean, if you look at it, no surprise. But, it's kind of cheesy and cringe in that sort of way, but it's enjoyable. This game has some cool mechanics. Like, each Fire Emblem has something different to offer in terms of mechanics, and I think the mechanics introduced in this game are really fucking cool. The first one is, and the major one, is the Emblem rings, bringing back protagonists from previous Fire Emblem games to give the new units some cool new abilities to really enhance the sort of strategic element of the game. I think it's really, really sick. I mean, it's a bit, it can be overpowered. Like, I remember using Emblem Corrin with Yunaka, because I think Yunaka has an ability where if you stand in a tile that gives you an avoidance boost, I think she does like twice as much crit rate or something like that. And Emblem Corrin's ability is Dragon Vein, which spawns like a bunch of fog, which gives Yunaka that boost to her critical hit rate. So I remember using that quite a lot. There are lots of cool combinations you can do with all the different emblems. It's just fun. It's fun to sort of use these abilities and skills introduced by the emblem rings and sort of come up with cool strategies like that. That's what I like about Fire Emblem, is the sort of strategy element, which is good because that's sort of the whole point. This Engage also introduced the break mechanic, which plays into the whole weapon triangle thing. I think that's really cool as well. It sort of places more of an emphasis on the weapon triangle, which kind of isn't that important in the other. I mean, it is still important because it affects the, hit rate and dodge rate and all that, but it's not that important. Whereas here, because it inflicts break, meaning you can't defend yourself, that's cool. I like that. It means you have to really think about what your enemies are doing, and also you can use your own weapons to get an advantage over a really powerful enemy. I think, the whole strategy element of this game is really bolstered by these new mechanics, and I really like that. The whole Somnial thing, where you sort of talk to your units and wander around, sort of carries over the same monastery thing, where it's like, yeah, cool the first time, but do we really have to keep doing this? It wasn't as egregious in Engage as it was in Three Houses. I do wonder what it'd be like for someone who's only played Three Houses to come and play Engage. Like, they must have gotten so confused, because Engage is closer to traditional Fire Emblem than Three Houses, but Three Houses is the most popular one, so I'm sort of curious to see how newcomers from Three Houses react to this game. But yeah, overall, very fun, very charming Fire Emblem game. One of my favorites for sure. Not my complete favorite. I still have a soft spot for Awakening, and I also unironically like Fates, not for the story, but for the gameplay, which is kind of sad. Fates is notoriously one of the worst Fire Emblem games, but I like it. And Engage is definitely up there. I reckon top 3. So if you're a fan of strategy, Fire Emblem Engage might be the game for you. Next up is Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon. Now, I am a pretty big fan of the Bayonetta games. I've played 1, 2, and 3 multiple times over, so I'm very much a fan of the character and of the gameplay. Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon, is very different to that trilogy of games. It's not a hack and slash, beat 'em up, whatever you want to call it, game. Bayonetta, the character, is not who she is in the trilogy. She's now a younger child version, which is what we all are. That's how aging works. We start off as children and we become sexy, badass, angel-killing demon wielders. That's just the circle of life. But yeah, Bayonetta Origins, very different, but very enjoyable. Even though it's completely different to what I know Bayonetta as, this game is pretty awesome. The thing that struck me right away is the presentation. I think it's such a beautiful and well-presented game. The whole storybook aesthetic with, like, I'm going to call it watercolors. I'm not sure if that's actually what it is. I'm not a very artsy person, but it just looks absolutely fantastic. And the music is wonderful as well. It's very nice and whimsical, and there are lots of callbacks to the, themes from the other games, particularly the first one. I found there's lots of crossover in terms of motifs and all that sort of stuff. And it's the same with dialogue as well, actually. They sort of do callbacks to similar lines and, you know, that sort of thing. It's I don't know, it's really cool. It's like a sort of, I want to say a love letter to the Bayonetta trilogy. Yeah, so I really liked the way it was presented. The gameplay is, it's very different from what Bayonetta is. To start off with, it was a bit mind-boggling, because the whole gimmick of the game is that you control Cereza and Cheshire, the stuffed toy, at the same time. So the left stick controls one, the right stick controls the other one, and you have to sort of do two things at once, which can be a bit, full on to start off with. But once you get used to it, it's really cool. The combat is pretty awesome. It's not as flashy as it is in, like, the main Bayonetta games, but it's still really, like, interesting. Like, you use Cereza to stun enemies and support Cheshire, who is the big behemoth that you control and tear enemies apart. It's just a really interesting way of doing combat. And I do like that there are sort of puzzles to solve and areas to explore. It's very awesome. The elemental cores are cool as well. They also add layers to the gameplay as the game progresses. Not just about exploration, but also combat. So it's a very well thought out, well designed game. It is the odd one out amongst the Bayonetta games. It doesn't take a genius to to be able to see that, but it is still really cool. The story is, it's very different from what this whole game experience is like, it's Bayonetta, it's very different to what Bayonetta is known as, but it's still really cool in different ways. And yeah, it was a really charming, fun story, albeit a simple one. It was pretty good. And Jean's chapter at the end, after you beat the main game, it was sort of conflicting, but I get what they were going for, and it sort of makes the ending of Bayonetta 3 seem like less of a shit show. It was cool to play as Jean, but I'm still not sure about the ending of Bayonetta 3 and how this ties into it. I'm just not happy with the direction that was taken. But yeah, overall, Bayonetta Origins, it's a really fun game. It's really unique. I've never really played anything like it. But yeah, it's very charming, very fun, and very whimsical. So if you're a fan of Bayonetta, you might not like this game because it is very different, but if you like the character, you'll like this game. And if you like storybook games, it's perfect for you. Just look at it. Look at that storybook element. Oh my god, you could read me to this as a child, and I would not fall asleep because it's so enthralling. Yeah, Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon gets a big thumbs up from me. Next up is Crash Team Rumble. Now, I have a feeling that this is going to be very hard to talk about because I don't really know how to describe it. I've literally never played anything that's remotely like it. But it is a very enjoyable game. I guess the best way to describe it is that it's competitive platforming. So the goal of the game, or at least the main mode of the game, is you're in two teams of 4, and you each have a bank. And the goal is to go around whatever map you're in, breaking open crates to collect Wumpa Fruit, and to bank it in your team's bank. And the first team to reach 2,000 is the winner. So it's competitive platforming. It's very well, it's not very platforming heavy, not as much as an actual platformer, but it's sort of like I want to say capture the flag. It's not even like that. It's sort of hard to describe, but the best I can do is competitive platforming. So you do like sort of vaguely regular Crash Bandicoot gameplay, but it's competitive. Like you're trying to score points against another team. I don't know, it's really hard to describe, but it's really, really enjoyable. You know, having all these different playable characters with all these different roles. You can be a scorer, a booster, or a blocker. All of the maps have a lot of variety. You know, you could summon nitrous oxide to shoot a laser beam at your opponents. You could summon a giant cloud of jazz to block your team, the opposing team's goal. There's just a lot going on. It can be very hectic, and you can have some very genuinely like close and intense matches. It's just, you know, it's very fast paced, very all over the place, very intense. It's just like an adrenaline rush of a game. Yeah, in the beginning, when it was in closed beta and also shortly after it released, it was just the one game mode, which was kind of disappointing because you do sort of wish you could do some other stuff. But as the seasons have gone on, they've added more stuff to it. So you've got more game modes, you've got party mode, you've got all sorts of things going on. You've got a battle pass, which is, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the whole battle pass concept, but I think it is better than how they handled the Grand Prix in Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, because I sort of suffered from a bit of burnout to that, whereas in Rumble, the seasons are sort of spread out over a longer period of time, and you can go at it at your own pace, and it's very easy to sort of get in, do your thing, get out, and earn your experience points. And I don't know, I feel like it's just handled better, and it is rewarding you constantly, so it is fun. Yeah, it's the thing about it is it's sort of hard to do justice in, but more by showing it and by talking about it. It's sort of, you don't really get the feel for it until you've actually played it yourself. But yeah, it's a really fun competitive game. I'm usually not big into multiplayer games. I usually prefer to sit down and enjoy a very solid single player experience, not because I have no friends, but because that's just what I prefer. And it's sort of odd that I enjoy this as much as I do, but it's a really fun game. I really like Crash Team Rumble. If you're hesitant to give it a try because you don't know what it is, just think it's platforming in teams against another team. That's like the best way I can describe it to you. And it is fun once you get into it. Yeah, it's a very unusual game. I've never played anything like it, but it's a lot of fun and I definitely recommend it. Even if you're not big into multiplayer, just give it a try. I guarantee you'll at least enjoy it somewhat. Coming up next is The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now this game carries a lot of things I liked from Breath of the Wild over. I still love the art style, the visuals, the music, and it's all still very enchanting. Even though the world itself is extremely similar to Breath of the Wild, it sort of still felt fresh exploring it a second time, this time for Tears of the Kingdom, because there are a lot of differences. You've obviously got the sky level and also the depths, so you've basically added two new Hyrules, essentially. I mean, even though the sky is pretty empty. But you know what I mean, it's adding more to explore, and that's what I loved about Breath of the Wild, is just exploring and finding things and doing things. And here in Tears of the Kingdom, it's amplified quite a bit. But obviously, the main appeal of this game is the creativity you can put into the gameplay. You can use the Ultra Hand ability, the Fuse ability, all sorts of things to make all of these incredible vehicles and contraptions and use them to solve puzzles and get places and do all sorts of things. It's basically Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts having a love child, and it's Tears of the Kingdom. And I think it's just, I was so giddy when I started playing this game, because just like the possibilities, I was so excited at what was possible in this game. And obviously if you were sort of online when this game was just released, you would have seen all sorts of wild, crazy inventions and contraptions that people were making, usually to crucify the little leaf dudes, which I think was pretty fucked up. But, you know, it was just amazing to behold. I saw one where it was like a giant death robot going on a rampage against a bunch of enemies. It was just insane. And, you know, it's one of those games where you never really tire of it. Like the gameplay, aside from all of the vehicle and building and all that stuff, it is very similar to Breath of the Wild. And the gameplay in Breath of the Wild was honestly a lot of fun as well. So it's just sort of an amplified versions of that. I did enjoy the temples, not as much as I did in the first game. I think I mean, they were still fun. I really liked the temples, but I think the divine beasts in Breath of the Wild were a bit better because they were sort of more interesting because they were like moving, like they weren't creatures, but they were giant robots essentially, and that's, you know, having a temple be alive is a really cool concept. That wasn't the case here in Tears of the Kingdom, but they were still a lot of fun. Yeah, I just think it's a pretty flawless game. The combat is just as good as it was before. The presentation is just as good as it was before, even if it is just Hyrule again, you know. But honestly, the selling point here is the ability to create essentially whatever you want. I think it's such a genius thing, and I'm excited to see what Nintendo does to take it further. Because honestly, it just makes Hyrule your playground. You can do whatever you want with all of these different components and pieces. It's just amazingly fun, and I had a lot of fun just putting things together and seeing how they would interact and just doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things with all the pieces. It's just such a fun, interesting game, and it really tests your creativity, especially in the shrines. So yeah, one of the best games I've ever played, Tears of the Kingdom. Like it more than Breath of the Wild, like it more than most games I've played. It's absolutely phenomenal. Next up is Hades. Hades is one of those games that has been on my radar for quite a while, but I never actually properly checked it out until recently. And I'm really glad that I did, because it's a very fun game. It sort of reminds me of The Binding of Isaac, but it's sort of a more combat-focused version of that, because Binding of Isaac is sort of like, it's kind of like Space Invaders, where you just sort of walk around and shoot things. Whereas Hades, it's more sort of like melee, and, well, not melee, it depends on the weapon you use. But it's sort of more involved combat. It's very fast-paced, very action-packed, and a very addicting game. I like how, because it's one of those games that, I don't know what the genre is, but it's one of those games where you go through a gauntlet of different rooms, trying to get as far as possible and eventually reach the end, and then you do it all again, but the next time with different powers. There's a genre, that's a genre of game, and it has a name, and I can't remember what it is, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I really like those sorts of games, and I really like this interpretation of that genre, because, you know, the whole point is to escape hell, essentially. And each escape attempt is different because you get all these different powers. And it is fun to sort of see how different powers and different boosts and, you know, abilities, how they all interact with each other, and how they make combat vary between each escape attempt. I think it's a really fun game. The combat can feel a bit button mashy at times, but it is still pretty fun. I'm quite fond of using the poison ability on the special for the bow. I use the bow that sort of homes in on enemies after you strike them with an initial arrow, so you can use that to stack lots of poison on them and just sort of wear them down slowly. I don't know why, but whenever a game gives me the opportunity to do poison damage, I sort of get an erection. There's just something about poison damage that I really like. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know why I like it so much, but there's just something about poison damage that really speaks to me. So I'm glad that Hades gives me the opportunity to do that. I remember the first time I managed a successful escape attempt. It was so satisfying. It felt like you've achieved the impossible. But yeah, it's a really fun, action-packed game. My favorite weapons are, as I said, the bow, and I also like the gun. I like fighting at range, like a coward. I don't know why. I just do. But yeah, Hades, very fun game, and I would recommend it if you'd like those sort of games that never run out of content, because this is one of them. It has a lot of personality as well. The characters and the overall story are sort of very involved and very enjoyable, even if sometimes I did occasionally skip through the dialogue because there is a lot of it. But you know, if you really had a bit of a stroke there. If you really sit down and read through all of it, yeah, you can really get invested in what's going on. So yeah, overall, fun game, even if it is a bit button mashy. I like the interaction of different powers. It's just a really enjoyable game. Stepping up to bat next is Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Now, I'm sort of a more recent fan of 2D Mario. I initially wrote them off as sort of all being the same and being kind of generic. And some of them are. The new Super Mario Bros. Wii was the first one that I played, and I thought it was fun. And then I sort of played New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, and thought, oh, it's kind of more of the same. Still a decent game, but it's sort of the same thing. And I was expecting initially every 2D Mario game after that to be more of the same thing. And so I was sort of blown away by how different Mario Wonder is. Just from the opening alone, I was already enchanted by it. There was so much flavor, so much personality, it had great visuals, bouncy animations, great music. It was just so amazing, especially compared to the other 2D Mario games, which sort of feel lifeless in comparison. I mean, even the simple addition of having the talking flowers adds so much. I love those talking flowers, by the way. I sort of thought they would get annoying, but I don't know, I just sort of love them. I want to adopt all of them. But yeah, based on not just the visuals, but also from the gameplay, this is such a diverse and varied game. There's so much variety, so much going on. Like, you never know what a level is going to throw at you. You might stumble across a bunch of singing piranha plants. You might turn into a blob of jelly and be forced to escape from rising lava. You might be solving a puzzle in some sort of manor in the desert somewhere. Like, every level is completely different, and you never know what to expect. And that's great, because what it is, it never strays too far from what Mario is. You know, most of it is still pretty standard platforming. Occasionally you might transform into a different creature. Occasionally you might have to swap up your gameplay style, but it's mainly still platforming. And the fact that they were able to put so many different twists on the gameplay, it's just so fun. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the Wonder Flowers add a sort of unexpected twist to the gameplay, and they're all incredibly fun. They aren't invasive, they just have their moment to shine, they never stick around for too long, and then they bugger off before you get tired of the gimmick. But that's not the only thing that Wonder does to make the gameplay interesting. You've also got badges, which grant Mario new abilities depending on which one you've got equipped. So you might get a variation on the wall jump, or you might be able to use Mario's hat to sort of parachute and glide along like Spyro would. That one's one of my favorites. I'm also a really big fan of the vine power-up, where Mario shoots a vine and sort of grabs onto a wall and clings to it. Like, that's... there's something about the movement of that is just so satisfying and fun to me. The story of this one, thankfully, isn't just a generic 2D Mario Peach damsel in distress story, and they tried to do something different with it. I mean, I love that they did that not just with the story, but also with like the world themes, because every 2D Mario game that I've ever played follows the same format of the first world is a grass world, then you've got a desert world, then a water world, then a jungle world, then a snow world, then a mountain world, then a sky world, and then a lava world. But in this one, they don't do that. They mix it up here, which is good. The new power-ups are pretty cool too. I really like the bubble flower. It essentially makes one-time use platforms, which is also great for movement. Synergizes well with the vine power-up I was just talking about. No, it's not a power-up, it's a badge. You know what I mean. The elephant power, not really sure what to make of that. It's okay, I guess. But you know, it's still cool. What I actually noticed a lot of was that a lot of design tropes that I saw a lot in Mario Maker actually sort of appear in this game. So you've got things like scavenger hunt levels, you've got the use of Koopa Troopa shells to activate blocks and switches. The badge levels sort of remind me of speedrun levels from Mario Maker, where it's less about making a typical level and more about challenging or focusing on a specific ability. You've also got side levels like the KO towers, the Wiggler races, and the badge challenges. They really help to keep things interesting, but I think even if they weren't there, the regular levels on their own are all unique enough to keep things interesting anyway. Yeah, I guess the only weak part of the game is the boss fights. They're sort of all Bowser Jr. except for the final one. The final boss was pretty cool, but all of the other boss fights just kind of suck. But yeah, I think the main thing to take away from this is that Mario Wonder does gimmicks right, where they're brief and they're fun, but they don't take over the whole game. The focus is still on the classic 2D platforming. And the gimmicks that do appear never stray too far from that 2D platforming. It's focused with a good amount of variety. Yeah, it was a phenomenal game. I went as far as 100%ing it and even buying all of those little standees. Like, I just didn't want the game to end. Genuinely, it's an incredible game. Probably one of my favorite Mario. I was going to say my favorite Mario game, but sort of Odyssey is really up there too. So if it's not Odyssey, Mario Wonder is my favorite Mario game. It's just so incredible. Next up is Luigi's Mansion 2. Now, I bought this off the back of reviewing Luigi's Mansion, because it made a very strong impression of me and I wanted to play more of the series. And yeah, it's not really a huge departure from the first Luigi's Mansion in any way. It seems to be the first game, just slightly better. It seems to capture everything I like about the first one, only it's more sort of streamlined. The game is broken up into smaller missions and the ranks make more sense. Because the thing about the first game was, it was just this, like, it was a bunch of gameplay and then it stopped for a bit and then it started again. Like, there was no clear, like, I don't know. There was just something about it that sort of felt like one big, massive level, which it sort of is, because it all takes place in one location. But in the review, I describe it as one big Legend of Zelda dungeon, and I stand by that, because that's what it feels like. Luigi's Mansion 2 takes a different approach, where it's got different locations that you have to go to and do separately, and each one has 5 or 6 missions, I think, to do. And you do them in that order. So you start at the first one, which is just a regular mansion, and then you move on to a different location, and there you keep going until you finish the game. So I like that. It flows better, it makes more sense. Yeah, there's a lot of variety in the areas. There's a lot more variety in the gameplay as well. There's a new flashlight that you can use to find hidden doors and hidden items and all sorts of things. It's more encouraging to go for 100%, like with finding booze and stuff, because you unlock extra missions. Yeah, it's just sort of, it's Luigi's Mansion again, but it's improved in the right ways. There's more variety, there's more gameplay mechanics, and it's got a bit more personality as well, I think. I think they've mastered the style of the personality and the presentation of it, because it does look very nice, it looks and sounds pretty good, but it has more personality this time. So I think, yeah, Luigi's Mansion 2, I might review it at some point. I believe there is a Switch HD remake coming at some point next year, so I might review that for Halloween like I did with the first Luigi's Mansion. Who knows? I'm not sure what the plans are. I don't think ahead. But yeah, it's a fun game, Luigi's Mansion 2, and I definitely recommend it if you like the first Luigi's Mansion, and probably if you like Luigi's Mansion 3, which I've not played, but I probably will at some point. Yeah, it's just Luigi's Mansion but better, so great job, Luigi's Mansion 2. And the last game for this year technically isn't even a game. It's RPG Maker XP. I'm one of those nerds who always wanted to make a game, but doesn't have the technical know-how or the ambition or the effort to actually follow through and do it. But I saw that RPG Maker XP went on sale on Steam for a grand total of $3.50. And I thought, this is the perfect opportunity, I may as well just do it. Because I'm not that familiar with the sort of RPGs that RPG Maker XP has in mind, I also downloaded Pokemon Essentials, because I know Pokemon, that's a game series that I understand. So basically I just spent quite a long time just learning what all the different things did and putting things together and making events and scripting things, and It was just a lot of fun. Like, it's technically not a game, but I had fun putting it together. So in a way, it felt like playing, just experimenting with different things that could happen, and all that sort of thing. So yeah, basically what I did is I made the beginning of essentially a Pokemon game, which includes picking a starter and doing the first route and having rival battles and all that stuff. And it was very simple, but it was very enjoyable. I just liked the idea of making a game, setting a challenge for myself in the form of a game. It's just something I've never done it before. I'm not sure if I'll ever do it in the future, but it was just fun to play around with. It's essentially just making your own world, which I guess, you can do that in other ways. But for me, it really manifests well in the form of a game, because that's what I do a lot, is play games. So it was just fun to actually create a gameplay experience, because, that's not something a lot of people do. So yeah, if I had the drive and the ambition and the work ethic to actually follow through and finish one, I'm sure it would be a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I don't do that. I would rather focus my creative efforts on something like reviewing games, where I get to make stupid jokes and be generally a pretty weird bloke. But yeah, I really enjoyed, I guess, playing RPG Maker XP or making stuff with RPG Maker XP. It was just a really cool experience. It's unlike anything else I've ever done. So yeah, I would not say I'm a competent game developer, but I would say that now that I have put together a gameplay experience, I can sympathize and understand how much work actually goes into making a game, and I respect all game developers who do this for a living, because it's fucking hard. Even when I had a tutorial and all of the tools were prepared for me, I struggled a bit initially. So, I greatly respect game developers who do this for a living, and it was a lot of fun to make a gameplay experience. So if you're someone who's always wanted to make a game, I would say wait until there's a sale, and then you can pick up RPG Maker XP or any of the other game making programs for as little as $3.50, and that's $3.50 Australian dollars. So if you're like in the UK, that's like £1. So no, it's not £1. It is £1. But what's the conversion? I'm not sure. Basically, it's very cheap. That's what I'm trying to say. So yeah, RPG Maker XP, while it's not a game, it is game related, and I very much enjoyed using it. And we've now reached the end. Those were the best games I played in 2023. Pretty solid year, I think. We had some pretty whopper games up in this lineup, and I was very satisfied with what I managed to play. Do let me know how your 2023 went, in terms of games, not in terms of your personal lives. I don't want to hear about your new job or how you've been abused by your stepdad or anything like that. I want to hear about what games you played. That's what I'm interested in. I don't give a shit about your personal life. Sorry, that was a bit mean, but it is true. Anyway, yeah, let me know how your 2023 went, and I'll see you in the new year, where everything will change. Because that's what happens when the clock ticks over to 2024. Everything changes. Because it's a new year. It's a new year. Everything changes in the new year. It's not like a societal concept that we humans made up. It actually has meaning, and it has bearings on the way the world functions. It's not just a number. See you then!